May 1, 1960. 13 miles above the Soviet Union, an aircraft operating completely out of reach of enemy fire simply blinks out of existence. Within days, the United States government issues a statement. They claim a civilian NASA weather research plane experienced oxygen difficulties and drifted off course. To sell the story, they even paint a model plane with fake civilian markings. But the man in that cockpit isn't studying the weather. He's carrying high-resolution espionage cameras, a hollow silver dollar containing a lethal shellfish toxin, and a secret capable of humiliating the President of the United States. Welcome to the channel. Today, we're looking at a 5-minute breakdown of the flight that caught the U.S. in a global lie. The disappearance of this single aircraft threatened to expose the most highly classified aerial operation of the Cold War. To understand why this flight existed, we have to look at the extreme paranoia of the 1950s. American intelligence had a massive blind spot regarding Soviet nuclear weapons. Politicians and the public feared a missile gap, a terrifying suspicion that the USSR was mass-producing intercontinental ballistic missiles far faster than the United States. Without reliable informants on the ground, the CIA needed eyes in the sky. Their solution was the U-2 spy plane, essentially a jet engine strapped into a lightweight glider frame. This animated diagram illustrates the core technical assumption that made the program viable. By cruising at an operational ceiling of 70,000 feet, the U-2 flew well above the 58,000-foot maximum reach of standard Soviet interceptors, like the MiG-19, and early radar systems. The entire American strategy for monitoring the Soviet military relied on this fragile assumption, that the U-2 was physically untouchable. That assumption was tested on May 1st. CIA pilot Francis Gary Powers launched from Pakistan, intending to fly entirely across Soviet airspace. But near the city of Sverdlovsk, the technological equation flipped. The Soviets had secretly deployed the SA-2, a new surface-to-air missile specifically designed to reach the stratosphere. The missile exploded just behind the U-2. The resulting shockwave violently tore the fragile aircraft apart in midair. The spinning descent was so severe that Powers was pinned inside the cockpit, unable to reach the plane's self-destruct mechanism. Struggling against the G-forces, he managed to bail out manually. When his parachute hit the ground, the KGB was waiting to capture him alive. Because Powers survived, rather than dying in the crash, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev was handed the ultimate piece of geopolitical leverage. Back in Washington, officials knew the plane was missing, but assumed Powers was dead and the U-2 vaporized. Operating in the dark, NASA doubled down on their fabricated weather plane narrative. President Dwight D. Eisenhower personally endorsed the lie. He stepped before the press, composed and authoritative, firmly denying any deliberate espionage. Khrushchev saw the trap Eisenhower was walking into. For nearly a week, he released only vague reports about shooting down a plane, deliberately letting the United States heavily commit to their false narrative. Then he sprung the trap. Khrushchev aggressively announced to the world that not only did they possess the intact wreckage of an American spy plane, but they also had the living pilot, who was actively confessing. To remove all doubt, the Soviets put the twisted metal of the U-2 on public display in Moscow, offering undeniable physical proof of American espionage to anyone who wanted to see it. The calculated reveal devastated American credibility on the world stage. Eisenhower was caught in an unspinnable lie. The immediate diplomatic casualty of this embarrassment was the highly anticipated Paris summit. Scheduled to ease East-West tensions, the meeting collapsed before it even began. The U.S. military faced an urgent strategic crisis. Manned reconnaissance flights over the Soviet Union were now definitively proven to be both lethal to pilots and politically toxic. They needed a way to gather intelligence without violating sovereign airspace. This forced a rapid pivot to a top-secret crash program called Corona, shifting resources away from vulnerable planes toward orbiting satellites. This chart compares the impact. In August 1960, Corona's first mission returned one film capsule, covering more Soviet territory than all 24 previous U-2 flights combined. Looking at this massive data influx, analysts finally saw the actual Soviet ICBM inventory. Numbers were far lower than inflated estimates. The terrifying missile gap was a myth. Ironically, the loss of Gary Powers' U-2 forced the United States to develop the exact invulnerable orbital surveillance capability it desperately needed to track its rival. But Francis Gary Powers was still trapped behind the Iron Curtain. He was subjected to a highly publicized show trial, staged in an ornate Moscow hall to maximize the propaganda value. He was sentenced to 10 years of confinement, ultimately spending 21 months in a Soviet prison. His ordeal finally ended on a foggy morning in February 1962, on the steel span of the Glienicke Bridge connecting West Berlin to the east. American lawyer James B. Donovan had quietly negotiated a high-stakes prisoner exchange. The United States traded a captured KGB master spy, Rudolf Abel, in return for Powers. Back home, Powers faced intense scrutiny, but after extensive debriefings and a Senate Select Committee hearing, he was fully exonerated. Records proved he followed his orders, maintained his loyalty, and refused to hand over critical intelligence. The U-2 incident ended the risky era of manned espionage flights over hostile territory. It forced the world into the modern age of orbital surveillance and established a quiet precedent for trading captured spies. If you enjoyed this dive into Cold War history, hit the subscribe button for more 5-minute geopolitical explainers. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.